The scratches brush is rather self-explanatory. It's going to create scratches as you drag across the surface. By default, it will extrude, but you could hold the control key to indent or check invert tool, which is how you would invert the action with all the other brushes. Now if you want, you can increase the fall off to make it fade along the edges. The resolution is a little bit lower up here than it is down here in this area, so let me undo a few times. Let's increase the fall off a bit more. Okay. You can adjust jitter position, which will make it respond almost entirely different than its default behavior. So let's turn that down just a bit more. There we go. Continue adjusting it just ever so slightly because a little bit can make a huge difference. So let's undo and let's bring our depth down a bit. You could also adjust things like your radius variation and so on. But one of the more useful ways of applying this would be to use something like the spline stroke draw mode to create skin folds. Create a starting point here, right click and drag to the right to increase my brush size. Right click and drag to create an even larger node. And then right click and drag left to reduce my brush size, or you could just use your bracket keys to do it on the fly. And then hit escape to finish the creation of the spline. I'm going to turn invert tool off, and then I'll hit the enter key to go ahead and apply it. Now that may look fine, but let me undo by hitting Control Z. Now I want to click on this spline options toggle and choose edit pressure profile. I can change this a bit to where it's applying more pressure toward the middle of the stroke and a lot less on the ends of the stroke. Okay, so let's try it again. Quite a bit of difference. And if you want to change these points, you can go to edit points or just hover over an individual point, but it will change to your current brush radius. So a good idea, if you want to make sure it doesn't change, is just use your bracket keys to kind of size it up as you hover over it. And then when you see this highlighted blue circle, you can go ahead and move it around. Let's hit escape. So you can see how it can be useful in certain circumstances. Scratches 2 is simply a smoother version, so for skin folds like this, you would probably want to use that instead. So let me undo a few times. And we'll go to Scratches 2. Let's move this entire thing, transform all. I'm going to move it back just a bit. And then I'll go ahead and go back to edit points and attach to surface so it snaps to the surface. And let's hit enter. Alright, that's quite a bit larger, and that's because 3D Coat by default remembers the settings you have for each brush. You can change that in the preferences panel, but let me undo and change the depth value to something like, under 20. And I'll hit enter one more time. Okay. So you can see with their pressure profile, it softens it up on the edges here. Let me undo one more time. And let's adjust our edit pressure profile. Maybe reduce this just a bit more overall. Hit OK. Okay. And I can adjust our depth value. Also, the fall off is really handy for this type of situation. So it's not so pronounced on the edges. It's actually a bit softer. So we can increase that quite a bit. So it fades in with the rest of the skin around it. I enter. So yeah, it can be very helpful. And when you get a behavior like this that you're happy with, you certainly want to go to your presets panel in the upper right hand corner and choose add preset. Now once it loads it, you want to double click on your tool and name it accordingly. So that way it's always ready at your disposal. The last thing I need to mention about the Scratches tool is that it behaves like the clay brush, where it actually goes through indentations and surface extrusions. So for example, if I were to go across here, you can see how that works. In some circumstances, that can be very beneficial. But in other situations, you may want it to follow the surface explicitly. That's probably where you would want to use something like the Absolute or the Extrude brush, which will follow the surface contour explicitly, and use a scratched brush alpha. And with that, we will conclude this look at the Scratches and the Scratches 2 brushes in 3D Code Surface Mode. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.